Welcome, reanimated fans, to this week's podcast. I'm H.A. Conrad, coming to you from Brooklyn, along with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin, and our intrepid guest co-host, Kyle Diaz. Hello, gents. How are things?
Hi.
Morning.
Morning. So today, we're going to talk about episodes 2 and 3 of All of Us Are Dead. And we have a couple of news items to get into. Nothing too crazy, but that's probably good since it takes us a while to get through all of this content. So what's new in your world, Stuart?
I mean, I could hear you smiling as you asked that question. As I am podcasting from under the veil of COVID-19, I got it. Yeah, it's happened. I'm one of the infected. I'm okay with it. I wish I hadn't gotten it, but now I have. And part of me was relieved, but part of me, when I was in bed for 17 hours on Friday, was certainly not feeling relieved. But I will say, get your vaccine and booster, folks.
Yep.
Imagine how much worse it would have been. At least that's what was going through my head too. It's like, this is really annoying and sucks, and I feel like garbage, but at least I'm not on a ventilator.
On the plus side, it's a chance to really earn your intrepid badge or your intrepid description. So
yeah.
Pushing on through.
He earns it every
podcasting
day.
Through it.
He earns it every day. He earns it every day.
Oh, HA, you're too kind. But let's also just hope that the virus does not become a Pontypool virus and become infectious through sound.
That would be really horrible. But while you were just off for a second, Stuart, Kyle and I were saying, like, I have very mixed feelings. Like, part of me is like, I'm fully boosted, and I almost like what you were saying, almost would it be a relief, but I don't really want to get it either because it sounds miserable. So
and you never know which version of it you're going to get. Like, a lot of people
right.
are still getting the completely asymptomatic, and do you want to roll those dice and be the one who, I don't know if you can still get long COVID if you're vaccinated and boosted. I don't think you can. Ugh.
You can, actually.
Well, yeah. So
that's
it's not
no
worth
good.
it.
No good. So anyway, I'll continue to be, cautious, but I don't know. We'll see how the rest of the months here go with the Omicron. The numbers are way down, but they're still, again, at a very high level if you like compare it to last year. So but I'm glad it sounds like you're on the other side. Is that right? Ish.
I mean, I don't know how this thing progresses. I definitely had a worse day than I've had the last two, but this thing also comes at you from funny directions. And I'm talking about poop. It's a whole weird element.
I'm sorry. It's terrible.
This is the kind of stuff we talk about on this pod. No, I'm kidding. All right, we're done. I'm done talking about
it. All right. Well, why don't we get into the news and then head off into our discussion of All of Us Are Dead. So we have some Tales of the Walking Dead casting items, some pretty heavy hitters in terms of cast. So we've got Anthony Edwards, who's been announced, Parker Posey, Terry Crews, Poppy Lou, Jillian Bell. I mean, there's that's a pretty crazy grouping already. So that's kind of a good sign, I'd say.
I think the Gimple also makes hints that this is just the first round of announcements, so there might be more coming. But honestly, Anthony Edwards, of all the actors that you were going to tell me were going to be in Walking Dead, I'm like, no way is Goose, or I forget his doctor name from ER, and honestly hasn't probably been in a lot of stuff that I've seen recently. But I can hardly imagine him being in a post-apocalyptic setting. It seems very out of character.
So, so we shall...
Are you guys not familiar with his work?
Oh, yeah, very familiar with his work. I mean, come on. And there's some good directing chops kind of people sort of being associated with this too, which is Haifa Al-Mansour. And so I don't know if you saw Motherland or anything like that, but and then we have a Picard, Deborah Kampmeyer, a Picard director in there.
This is like a self-contained stories week to week kind of thing, like an anthology.
Each one's a bottle episode, it sounds like.
Yeah.
which I kind of like actually. So
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to move the universe forward at this point.
yeah.
Considering how much lore they already have from the other two series.
I'm also pretty excited to see Parker Posey in this. I don't know if either of you watched the Lost in Space kind of.
Yeah, she's amazing in that.
She's really, really good in that. So I don't know. I'm excited about all this.
She has to play a villain because that's kind of her sweet spot, I
Thing.
think.
Well, she's got that face, that just like sneery thing that she does so well, and she plays a really good weird villain in Lost in Space. I think she kind of makes that show.
Man, ever since Dazed and Confused, she's been doing that stuff, and she's been nailing it. So yeah.
Oh, and don't forget Best in Show, one of her best roles.
And Terry Crews and Jillian Bell have both mostly worked on comedies, and so it'll be interesting to see. I mean, Terry Crews has that massive physicality. I guess he could do whatever. But Jillian Bell, I've only seen her do real deadpan comedy, and so I'm kind of curious to know how she will adapt to a horror role too. I'm not familiar with Poppy Liu's work.
She's been in like she was in Better Call Saul and Law and Order, like Special Victims and that kind of thing. But I have not seen her in anything, other than those things that I can recall. So
I have a, not to just like totally throw us off on a tangent, but what do you both peg as like the beginning of the modern zombie revival? Like, because there was basically no zombie media for a long time, and like, what do you think was like reestablishing pop culture moment for zombies in the early to mid 2000s?
I think it was two things. This is my take, and it was 28 Days Later.
Yep, that's
and
what I would.
It was the 2004 Dawn of the Dead remake by Zack Snyder, and it
And
was those two together. I think neither one of them was responsible for it by themselves.
They weren't and then I'd also have to say that the Walking Dead graphic novels really took off. So that sort of after 28 Days Later, obviously, but I think that all of that stuff kind of together. But I think specifically the idea of the fast zombie really just stirred everything up.
Those are both really, really good takes. I was thinking about it because this reminds me of the self-contained nature of it is kind of World War Z, the book-esque, and which we've never gotten a good adaptation of, and which was kind of the first piece of zombie media that I ever really remember loving and being kind of like obsessed with. And so I'm excited for it for that reason, if they can kind of get some good self-contained storylines going. And for me personally, like that was the thing where it was like, oh, like this is a piece of zombie related stuff that's going huge. Although both 28 Days Later and Day of the Dead and or Dawn of the Dead and the Walking Dead stuff all predated it. So, and
I mean, World War Z, I also really loved that, but to me that was kind of a continuation because I was already reading the graphic novels at that point. And I mean, definitely 28 Days Later was sort of like when I saw Dawn of the Dead, I'm like, oh, look at what you did, stealing from 28 Days Later. But but that is really where I feel like things just started to kind of snowball or just become a little bit more, it was sort of like it gave people permission to really explore the genre more and in a different way than the Romero type storytelling. So but anyway,
but not a tangent, Kyle. We're always happy to wax on about our beloved genre.
Yeah, and our beloved 28 Days Later, since I think when we talked about it, we reviewed it for like 4 hours or something.
It was
crazy.
At least it was as long as the film was our review. Yeah, it was silly.
But yeah. And then but back to news items. Do you want to talk about the next let's talk about some NFTs. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, okay, raise your hand if you even really know what an NFT is.
I know what it is, but
I mean, ridiculous. Yeah, but if it yes. So I think there's just as much vitriol around NFTs as there is excitement. And so I find it very interesting when people are like, yeah, and here's a press release to announce our upcoming round of NFT releases linked with our IP, because you're going to anger a lot of people by saying this. I don't know. But AMC is partnering with an NFT producer to sell NFTs that are related to this final season of Walking Dead. So,
Well, maybe they can all sell it to each other and drive up the price.
loosen the strings on your digital wallets and buy those JPEGs or whatever they actually are. Those unique ones and zeros.
Yeah. But
21st century Beanie Baby craze.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But there's nothing to hold on to at the end of the day.
Right. But lastly, I do think we need to let you talk about this, Stuart, since it seems as if this came out at an opportune moment for you in your time of need.
Well, okay, yeah. So once I was able to get out of bed and didn't have a splitting headache, I was able to focus on one of my great passions, which has become Dying Light 2, which came out on February 4th, I think. Yeah. And Dying Light 2 is this game I've been talking about on this podcast, and it's been pretty fun. There's a lot of reviews out there, and I'm sure, AJ, when you were looking for zombie news, you were like, Dying Light 2, get out of my news feed. I want to read about real zombie stuff.
Yeah, that was all that there was pretty much this week. So
people,
but that's all right.
I mean, it's good. It means that it's selling and people are paying attention to it and writing about it, and I like that. And it's a graphically very immersive game. It's a lot of fun. The day-night stuff is just as day-nighty as it was before. Terrifying. I have these like visceral moments in my computer chair where I'm like leaning forward because I can feel the zombies right behind me chasing me, and there's like a little distance counter. It's counting down in the corner of my screen. I'm like, oh my god, they're getting closer, and I'm leaning into my monitors. It's one of those.
So
I
like to imagine you doing this and then like grabbing a bite of a bagel as you just like keep just focused on this game.
It's that, and then taking a squirt of Afrin currently. But yeah, it's not a good scene over here. But the game is extremely immersive, like I said. And I don't know if you remember, I said that you can also like align yourself with factions, and the choices that you make will affect the ecosystem and the look and feel of the city that you're in. And so I've chosen to align myself with the authoritarian peacekeepers, and I have a feeling it's gonna go badly for the people of Villador. But we will keep the zombies out with an iron fist. That's my take.
Sweet. So do we want to get into it?
I think we should.
All right. So full, this is just a not full disclosure, I guess, but just for whatever reason, my Netflix or something with Netflix with episode 2 is going a little wrong. So indeed, I did see the second teachers conference, but thought it was part of the prior episode. It was not. But
there's some issues with that scene anyway. Honestly, that scene kind of indicates that some of the teachers have been seeing stuff that we don't see them see, if that makes sense.
But anyway, sorry for the confusion in the last recap. But
we'll get you there, AJ.
I did miss the first minute and 15. So you two should take this away in terms of the opening, and then we'll get into it.
Kyle, what were your impressions of the first, the opening scene, which I thought was quite heartwarming for the first 30 seconds?
I mean, one thing that I think we'll talk about throughout this, these couple of episodes is that tonally, this show is all over the map. I cannot pin it down because like sometimes it's kind of like a goofy, almost Shaun of the Dead-esque like comedy. And then sometimes it's just like brutally like disturbing and visceral. And so yeah, I kind of liked that opening like LARPing scene, and then they kind of cut to real life, and the guy's got the cone on his foot, and then we get cone foot zombie for a few minutes, which I thought was very amusing.
And I'll admit, I was wondering where the heck he came from, so this helps. And I am sad that I'm gonna try it again. I did try rebooting, and it just seems to be this episode that something's up with. But and I missed the LARPing scene. Come on.
Yeah, it's LARPing light for sure, but it's still it's fun.
They're basically just waving around some sticks, and he's got a cone on his foot. Yeah. But Conefoot Zombie was definitely I thought like kind of goofy and hilarious. But then we just get into some other stuff that's just so dark, and it's maybe it'll click at some point, but for now, I just feel like I'm getting kind of like tonal whiplash from it. But
Okay.
I kind of feel like it's a little deliberate. I did notice this too, Kyle, and I feel like it's their way of lightening the really dark stuff, and so that you're not taking it all too seriously, I suppose.
Mhm.
And that, in addition to sort of the weird, and it's not quite slapstick, but it is humor in a like really dark humor, but it is humor. Just even with like some of the romantic things and the things that honestly I don't know that people would really be worrying too much about if they're getting like eaten or fear of being eaten. Um, but I feel like it's somewhat deliberate to keep you a little bit unsettled, honestly.
I'm
But
taking my cues from the music in terms of like,
yeah,
what
the
I
music is also so strange. Like there's
it's like
some
when it
places
turns
where-
jazzy or like there's some like funky blues music going on. I'm like, all right, everything's gonna be fine, even though
like
they're in this
when
they're
they're
in a
coming
hallway.
down when
Yeah.
they're coming down this is later in the episode, but they're coming down the like makeshift fire hose
Yep.
thing, and the music is just like
Yeah,
it's
it's
just like, what
ridiculous.
is going on
Almost like
there?
Seinfeld music.
But it lets you know that there's nothing to be worried about for right now, because you will have to be worried later. So just buckle up, But yeah, what we're gonna get to the scene where Daesu picks up the door 30 times, but
Yep.
honestly, like it's scenes like that just kind of also have you going, yeah, what is this show?
Yeah.
This is great, but I'm also confused.
But we plunged pretty quickly into the super impressive oneer and an immersive just long tracking shot through the cafeteria, which is
Oh, it's
awesome.
so good.
Yeah.
Can we ask the most important question about this shot is how many of these actors were injured especially once the sprinklers go off and they're running around, and in the background of these scenes, they're still moving with a fair amount of speed, and there's a lot of sharp edges. Like, don't you feel like somebody must have fallen and whacked their face on a
it's
table?
not just that, but there's some like the floor is clearly really wet and slippery and they're falling all over the place, but also just some of the contortions. I mean, look, it's an incredible scene, but I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, oh man, I think someone clearly like got injured in this thing because they're also all running into each other. And so, but really
there could be lots of things that we're not seeing here too. The people in the background could be filmed on a green screen and digitally added in later. They could be slightly what they used to call like under cranking, but now is probably just done digitally, where they're subtly speeding up
a little bit. I think they are sped up a little bit, but still, it's a lot of people to be choreographing in this way, and they do a great job. And
I would love to know how many times they had to shoot it. Like they're just the main folks who are kind of front and center, and there's probably some hidden cuts here and there in like whip pans and stuff, but it's still just an incredible feat. It's a really immersive way to show the pandemonium that's erupting around the school.
And I do especially like, even though I'm still having a lot of questions about the timeline of how and when people get from when they're infected to when they really like flip, still have many questions about that. It still seems to be applied unevenly, but I do like the sort of transformation, the whole like back bending thing that they do, and they do it really dramatically in several scenes in this episode. But like the one I'm thinking of here is especially like the girl who sort of like gets like spun out with Anjo, and then you see her transform, and it's just like really impressive contortion stuff going on and acrobatics and all sorts of things, with a massive cast, and they're all doing kind of crazy things. I really loved the fight choreography and all of the effects in this. I think they're really amazing.
Got to say, Mullet Bully really held his own in this.
Oh, yeah.
Like whether it's with trays whacking people, he actually stabs a girl on
The fork.
He goes fairly quickly to stabbing. I think that Mullet Bully obviously is. We identified him as
his name is Guinam, and he's really great in the fight scene, but just continually he's a dick. He's like a total
Just the
dick.
world's worst person. For
Yeah.
even in my story, he totally doesn't actually even need to be.
Yeah.
He's just throwing people into zombies.
But
Yep.
the thing I kept noticing and going back to as I'm watching this scene unfold and once they escape the cafeteria is Changsen and Anjo. And the last scene we had with them was her saying to him, "You're not really my friend, and you don't care about me." And then everything he's doing to save her life in the next couple of scenes, and she saves his life once too with the fire
Yeah.
extinguisher. But it's just like, to me, I'm just like looking at this going like, actions speak louder than words. The guy's a doofus, but I mean, come on, Anjo, pay attention to what's going on here.
We're gonna get there over the course of this discussion, but like there's really stiff competition for worst human being in the groups of people that we're following so far.
Yeah. I would say it's between it's definitely between Guinam and Lee who is it? Lee Na Yeon.
Okay,
Na Yeon.
but is
Na Yeon.
Jongsen, that's the girl who
No, Changsen is Changsan Chicken. He's the
okay,
male
No,
lead
Changsen is
after
not one of
Daesu.
them.
Yeah.
No,
Na Yeon
it's,
is the worst.
Yeah, she's the worst. She's like, she basically like almost kills Changsen by, needing like a motivational speech to get up after her friend fell out a window. Yeah.
Right. But anyway, yeah, there's lots going on. But I think Guinam, if I'm being kind, can say, well, he's in a survival situation. I'm definitely not excusing it, but I do think that you need to have some villains, and he plays a really good Mullity villain.
He's definitely a villain. When he stabs that girl, he gets blood in his mouth, and I wonder if we're going to see that that's an issue at any point. Probably not, because I think
so there's two. So I noticed that too, and then in the next episode, somebody else gets like really hit with blood in the face, and so I have to, that's a question I have about, again, the timeline and how people get infected. So maybe that will
couple things, because I'm always like really interested in the mechanics of the turning, so I make a lot of note of this stuff. So it doesn't seem like getting the blood in your mouth turns you. It has to go like right into your bloodstream, which I actually kind of buy. Like your stomach and mouth are not a very hospitable place. Not all germs can enter you that way. And then the turning speed seems to be determined by two things. And one is, I think, how close to the brain you're bitten. Yep. So people who are bitten on their hands or extremities seem to turn a little slower, and like the size of the bite and how much stuff is transmitted from it. And then the second part is how afraid you are. And that goes back to like the kind of like the, I don't know, vlog entries that we're seeing from the teacher who kicked this whole thing off by extracting the mouse DNA. He talks a lot about how this is activated by fear. And so if you're in a highly stressful, fearful situation, you seem to turn faster than if things are relatively calm and there's not a lot of noise, and you don't really know what's going on around you because you've been sedated or whatever. So
right, but it still doesn't. And Beyond Chan, the teacher dad, the thing I'm still wondering about, because we saw that his son was able to, like, he kind of went zombie, probably because he was scared, but then he came back. And so we haven't really, at least I don't think we've seen anybody do that. So maybe that's just because he was patient zero. But that is something I'm wondering about, but maybe, we'll see more of that later. But that
kind of see a little bit of that with patient Beta, the original girl zombie at the school. Because she kind of goes catatonic and sleepy until she ends up in that MRI during this episode, right? She doesn't.
A fantastic scene, which we should discuss.
We will get there.
Yeah.
First, there's a pretty fraught race to get into the homeroom classroom from both Changsan and Anjo and Namra and Daesu. They both go in different ways, which I thought was kind of enjoyable. But these are great scenes to show just the chaos on the campus. Like being outside worse than being inside? I guess it must be because everybody's trying to get back inside, but then later they're trying to get out. So it's a bit of a catch-22. But like the pipe truck crashing and the ladder climb up through the window. Both of those are really fun. Honestly, you thought this episode might just be 70 minutes of running and screaming, HA, and you weren't too far off. But they managed to make it enjoyable anyway, because it's interspersed with scenes of like character development, and so I did appreciate that.
It's definitely enjoyable, but there are definitely parts where I was just really exasperated, and I think I was trying to sort of pin down, like, I know that they're kids, but they're not stupid. And, they make these comments like, oh, they can't open doors. And then they don't easily blockade the doors in a way that makes sense. Instead, they're like relying on kids to just like hold the doors, which obviously leads to a pretty significant scene. And the whole, their escape to yet another classroom. But
Those doors are garbage though. Like,
they're garbage, and there's so much glass, and like, but they have desks, they have stuff to barricade, which they eventually do, or tables and things like that. So I don't know, I'm really bothered by that specific thing, but whatever. I mean, they gotta like have them sort of, you gotta keep it going, and to have the sort of 70 minutes of rain and screaming, you gotta have to like have them move around a little bit.
I think these are some pretty dang weak zombies. Like, these zombies cannot push through very much stuff. Even just a regular glass window, like they're
Right.
having a lot of problems with it. So I almost kind of wonder, I don't know exactly how standardized Korean like high school design is, but I kind of wonder if that was like starting with the environment and working backward to how strong your zombies can be, because I feel like zombies from like another form of media would have just totally destroyed every single barrier in this entire school, because they're all
Right.
flimsy and full of glass.
Yeah. And also, I mean, the other thing about these zombies that, they're even in the sort of escape that we see with these kids, there's very easy ways that they could probably take a chomp out of people, even just like the fingers and things like that. And they don't do that. And so they're not in exactly as effective as you would maybe expect them to be, only when it's convenient, and they can secretly bite people in ways that you don't see and they don't react to, a la um a la Walking Dead sometimes.
Yeah.
But but I thought that overall I really loved this whole episode. I liked the sort of the different things and the different like things that they had to do. You've got this mayhem breaking loose on this campus, and you're kind of like, well, what does the outside world think? And then you have the kids trying to basically reach emergency services, and nobody believes them. And
Well, and also this is where Chung-san name drops Train to Busan, right? Like, he's just like, yeah. And then as soon as Bearsu gets in the room, he's like, it's a zombie invasion. Right. And so I love that about this show, that they're doing and you mentioned this last time, Kyle, that like they are doing the aware approach to a zombie outbreak. It doesn't mean that they necessarily know the rules of the lore. And I think that they've subtly changed the target. Like, the brain doesn't necessarily seem to be the place to kill these zombies either, right?
And they kind of, seems like if you cause a mortal enough wound, like the zombies are like basically normally killable. Because like there's one zombie that I can remember that just gets stabbed in the neck a bunch of times and loses a bunch of blood, and then essentially seems to die.
I think it might be the neck. I think the neck might be the sweet spot.
Yeah, the mullet guy, that's what he does with the fork and the girl. And then also archery woman.
You're right. Yeah.
Hari also does that. And so I think, I do like how they talk about their knowledge of zombies, and the Train to Busan thing is hilarious. So that's great. And then, so I like that they're kind of have some sense of it, but the rules aren't exactly what they think. So that's, that's kind of a cool thing. What else was I going to say about this whole episode? I want to, I do want to say that the adults other than Ms. Park are just generally unhelpful. So that includes all the teachers, the principal, whose biggest thing was to try to like keep this under wraps. But then we also have the coach. And so there is like a good tension between, the authority of the adults and then what the kids are doing. And so like Coach Kang getting into the classroom and then them noticing that he's bitten is like a really incredibly, like, it's a stressful and scary scene, but it is also this kind of a cool thing because the kids are like, nope, you should get out of here now.
What's specifically Isak who holds the line, and
Yep.
nobody really voices. Once he starts getting violent, then yeah, the guys get involved. But
Yep.
this is a thing that these kids seem to have, which is just like paralysis when they're faced with people. Well, in this case, they're just confronting him because he was lying about, or at least not acknowledging the fact that he was bitten. But over and over in these two episodes, somebody starts to turn and everybody stands around and watches, right? Like that just keeps happening. And I
Yep.
feel like losing Isak, which we do in this episode, which is a huge bummer. Maybe she was the only one who was willing to like speak truth to power, or like to take action when she saw something that wasn't right. I do feel like losing her was a big problem for this ensemble. Hopefully somebody will grow to fill that gap, like, because it does seem like that was needed.
So the kids are all hiding out in the classroom, and Coach Kang or Mr. Kang shows up. And one thing that I did like, one little kind of subtle interaction, is that he shows up and he immediately just assumes control, and the kids seem like so grateful to have somebody who's finally just like telling them exactly what to do, because they can't reach any kind of consensus among themselves at all. They just totally yell and fight and bicker and squabble about everything. And so he shows up and he's just like, block that door, put these over here, come on, move this, what are you doing standing over it? Like, and like, I think the kids are all really relieved to have that kind of like, oh, there's an adult here, and it's finally like, gonna help us figure out what to do. And then almost immediately they notice the bite mark on his arm, and that's what sets up the showdown. But I thought that was a nice little touch that, like, it kind of, for just a 2-minute period, is this like blessed authority figure who is taking a load off their mind. And then it's such I think it's really crushing to them when he turns, because it's like, oh God, even the teachers, can't help us. And they're going to have that same disappointment as they survive to escalate this up further and further and further through every level of kind of authority figure they have. So the police
Right.
aren't
And they
helping.
even, I mean, they even
Yeah.
do a little, like, I don't know if you caught the little thing where they have the picture of, because this is her like classroom, they have a picture of Miss Park, and it's like she's watching you or something like that.
Mhm.
Like, it's her photo, and that sort of, I feel like that is definitely just an indication of how the teachers work in this school and how the kids view them. And that just totally gets destroyed. And
And
I,
Miss Park will really let them down in the next
yep.
episode.
Yeah.
You think she okay? Oh, interesting. I do think the one adult that the show is setting us up to think is not going to fail the kids is Anjo's dad, the head of his little EMT team. Well, at least not by the end of episode 3. At least we still have some hope for him. But yeah, I agree. Otherwise, Coach Kang, the principal, have all been real letdowns. The gardener was pretty happy to stab a kid in the stomach earlier with his shears, which seemed a little bit cold-blooded, but also probably justified considering he was eaten out just after that.
Well, but we also see, I mean, even in the whole scene with the archery team coming in, how Hari is getting sort of dressed down by the coach. Like, he's shaming her because he's like, oh, you didn't even like hit this level, you're not going to go to college, you think it's competitive, whatever. And as they kind of like drive into the chaos that is the high school, I don't know what happens to Coach. I can't imagine anything good happens to him. But we do see Hari later, and she's doing all right. So I guess she's like up to snuff. But I think that they are definitely giving this, like, there is this theme throughout the show that the adults are no longer are not helpful. And so that's, I mean, I would say even the adults who mean well, Mrs. Park, for example, and and then Johnson's mom, like, they mean well, but they're not necessarily going to be able to help them out of this mess. So
yeah, so a lot of that still remains to be seen. Mrs. Park, I would say, is down but not out by the end of episode 3. We don't know. She might have some more to contribute.
maybe, but she does contribute the whole PA system. thing, which I thought was utterly unhelpful. It's like a very strange speech.
It came a little too late. I don't know what happened between the attack of Conefoot and her being able to make that announcement, but it was like 30 minutes of TV time went by, and clearly everybody was turned who could be turned by that point. Of course, that scene is amazing, but it comes after our heroes of homeroom 2-5 have to make their break from their classroom because Coach Kang and another girl have been infected and are zombies now, and so they have to leave the classroom and make their run through the hallways.
Right.
Here we get to see Daesu fight like 10 zombies off with his bare hands.
Badass.
He does a kick off of the wall.
It's great.
He's just amazing. I mean, they lose him in this fight, not lose him, but he doesn't make it into the science lab with them. But it's just an incredible series of scenes, not least of all because Daesu does this. Daesu's the big guy, and he has the most amazing reaction faces to a lot of stuff. He's quickly becoming
one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I think he's actually my favorite of the survivors so far.
Yeah,
really
he's awesome. But that's this shot or series of shots. I don't know if it was like a 10 camera shot or something of him picking up this door and running down the hallway with it. What were your reactions to this?
I loved it. And this is also a little bit of what Kyle was saying, is that there is a level of like physical comedy because it's not like, it's a little bit silly because it's like there's just no way that they would make it. But he's just like, okay, we're just gonna get up and we're gonna get through this. And I do think he's one of my favorite characters too, because he just is unstoppable. And he's like, all right, well, I'm just gonna ram through these 20 zombies and make like a path for everybody. And the other students are kind of helping with weird little windows, but he has a whole door. I don't know, it's like a battering ram. And as I said, never mind the fact that they could all get their fingers bitten or they could go below and bite, like, okay. And I do like the choreography here, and especially when they get upstairs near the science lab, and Anjo sort of breaks into it with a fire hose, which plays a key part later. I think that this was great choreography, and I did like these scenes because it shows the characters like who they are a little bit better, I think. And we really see like throughout this episode who each of these people is. I mean, so we see Anjo. We definitely like see who Na Yeon is. Like basically all throughout this episode, she is constantly the one that's like, don't let that person in, get that person out. And we really see her true colors in the next in the next one. But she is constantly this like horrible character. And then we see, the sacrifice of others. So I do think I liked this because it lightened things up a little bit, but it also showed like it helped show who each person was. And then we get into sort of the next episode and it just continues that trend.
I was mostly just like thrown by the Bionic Man style shooting of the door pickup and the run, where they just do it 3 or 4 times in a row, and the music played over it.
That's kind of what I was saying at the beginning about the tonal inconsistency. It's not just the writing or the actions of the characters or the little kind of comedy beats that they put in there. It's like the actual production of the show, and you kind of take your cues about how seriously to take a piece of filmed media from how it's filmed. And so like it would be weird if you were watching Downton Abbey and then all of a sudden somebody was just like running in super slow-mo across a field while AC/DC was playing in the background. Like that would be weird. That would be tonally inconsistent with the rest of the show, which is very naturalistic and like, kind of sedate filmmaking. And so like they go back and forth here between it being almost like kind of documentary style, you're seeing everything exactly how it happens, and then these just like moments of like just kind of something you would expect to see on like a Peacemaker or something. And so it's not bad, but it's just a little bit, it throws me every single time, and it's been throwing me since the very beginning when they had that one or kind of circling shot on top of the roof, which looked like it was out of like the Matrix or something, and then cut straight from that to like just an entire rest of the episode that's essentially filmed like in a very kind of like naturalistic style. So it's not a bad thing, but I do think every time it happens, it's a little bit jarring, and it extends to the music choices that we already pointed out at some times. And there's just a little bit of like, was this directed by the same person? Like, is how I feel every time something
So
like that
I
happens.
kind of feel like what you're talking about is a little bit more comic book style, like why they're flipping back and forth from these things, and that's what it feels like to me, and that's what that specific scene feels like to me, and actually the one on the rooftop as well.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like it's deliberate, and I feel like it is supposed to make you feel a little bit off kilter because you don't know what to do with it, right? um and I think because it is kids, and they reference, I mean, they're referencing Train to Busan. I think you're not supposed to take the whole world all that seriously, and it is supposed to be a little bit Shaun of the Dead, but also a little bit Train to Busan.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I think it's a choice that they made to keep it, I don't know, to kind of keep going back and forth, and not that it, because there are really serious and horrible themes, as we're going to talk about. And but I think it's also to kind of lighten it up to some extent, because this is like ultimately the kids, and that's why we're also talking about their relationships and things like that in the middle of this horrible event.
What's kind of genre defying in the way that they are lightening it up, as you say, is that they're not using the genre typical shopping scene to lighten things up, right?
Right.
There's
They're
still a
not doing
zombie
it
threat, but they're doing it through cinematography and music,
right.
and the way that they're shooting actually zombie fighting scenes in a
Right.
way. Like it's a novel approach to lightening the mood in a zombie show, I would say. So that's been pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So once they get into the science room, there's also a pretty funny laugh out loud moment where Daesu's head gets grabbed by a bloody zombie hand when he's making one of his reaction
That was
faces.
very funny.
It was
All right. I'll admit I did a jump scare at that scene because I wasn't
yeah, it's
fully
supposed
paying
to be
attention.
both. It's like a jump scare and laugh, right? Because he's having his like moment of like, oh, wiping his eye, and then suddenly he's getting grabbed, and you're just like, oh my god. It's pretty great. And we get to see what's going on the roof where the two nerds are, and she's being just such a huge downer.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, we're outcasts again, and I hope everybody dies. And then that's it. Like we don't see them again for the rest of the episode.
But I also, again, think that that's supposed to be kind of a ridiculous, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's supposed to be a little overly dramatic and overly like,
Like it feels to me like those two are gonna end up ruling the world when this is all said and done.
Probably.
Yeah.
They
Although
might.
my main question is, I'm just looking at them and I'm like, gosh, you've been standing a long time. Like, don't you want to find a seat or like, like that's a long time to just be standing in the sun like that with no shade.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think last time I had said, oh, maybe we're going to see all these children maturing and all the petty drama of high school is going to go by the wayside. And clearly you guys were right. I was wrong. Kids will be kids. We're going to have petty stuff. Also, it's a Korean zombie drama, so we're going to have some class struggle thrown in there too. It'll be great. Outside the homeroom, mullet bully is like throwing his first shelter buddy out to die.
Yep.
This is such a short-sighted strategy where he ends up having to fight them all at the end anyway.
Right. That was the thing that I was like, you are throwing them out, but then they're just becoming more sort of like more people for you to have to deal with in the end. But he's really awful and just keeps throwing people out for fodder. So, but again, he's mullet bully, so it's not totally shocking. And again, the choreography with him under the sort of different tables is kind of cool, and just seeing like how everything's like happening and continues to happen in the cafeteria area / kitchen area is pretty good.
Yeah, and even by the end of episode 3, we haven't gone back to him, and it's nighttime now by the end of episode 3, and I'm curious if he's just been in there all day, like since lunch until after dark. He's just been in the cafeteria kitchen slaying bodies, or maybe I don't know, he's not going to be dead, unfortunately, because I think he's too established now.
Right. And then the bathroom kids, kids that are hiding in the bathroom, is the other sort of key little group.
Introducing new characters, which is interesting. Like they didn't introduce everybody.
I was gonna ask, hey, did we see like badass smoking chick Smoking as in smoking a cigarette. No. Did we see her last week? I don't remember that.
I don't think we did.
did. I think this is a whole new group. At least I think it is. So this is the badass smoking chick is Mi Jin, and then Jun Seon is the guy stuck in the stall with Halim. And then this whole thing is again exactly what you're talking about, Kyle. There's like beats in this that are incredibly tragic because obviously Halim is infected.
Mhm.
And then you've got, she's being like, her friend is like, okay, well, I guess I should come out of there because you're infected. And then badass smoking chick is just like, all right, like keep her in there. We're gonna die if we don't do this. And they're like taunting each other. And Halim is like, you're gonna be the first one I eat when I get out of here. And then we have her transformation scene, which, is just terrible. So, and then the killing scene itself has like weird beats of like kind of like a little Shaun of the Dead stuff. And then until she's finally taken out, but it's like this is also like a different way of, I don't know, just like in the close quarters trying to like kill an infected person. And then we learn more about the neck thing in this, I suppose, because of the arrow taking her out ultimately.
Well, and a broom or a mop handle through the mouth out the back of the head
Did
would
not
kill a
work.
zombie in almost every other zombie canon
Not
we
work,
know.
yeah.
I gotta say, I was really happy. I was like, finally, we get to see a zombie get freaking stabbed with something like this. So far, nobody has been able to kill. They've been pinning them against the wall with desks.
Yep.
They've been running away from him. They've been banging them with fire extinguishers and throwing them out windows. But I was like, we finally get to see somebody actually just stab a zombie through the face with some improbably pokey sharp object, and it was I can't believe we had to wait 2.5 hours into this show to get that, but I was happy to see it.
It's interesting that they introduced these two archers and then they don't really do much else with them for the rest of these 2 episodes either.
Yeah,
no, that's true.
But I was going to say, but even the dialogue in the scene is like, this is their friend, especially like his friend that's turned, and like, this is, they're like being like, die zombie bitch, and like thing, like the dialogue is like super weird and like not acknowledging the fact that this was like a friend of yours that you're now, which is a pretty big contrast from, and I mean, maybe they're not like super good friends, but a big contrast between what happens with Isak, right? So I don't know, it's like that's definitely kind of a weird uneven storytelling, I guess, or maybe it's just how the different characters react, and they're going to show more with that later with these two. But
yeah, I think Mi Jin is that kind of callous sort of character. Her big friend is much more sympathetic toward his former friend, because we after this I think we do go into the Isak is trying to comfort Anjo because she thinks that Daesu is dead. She tries to get Jung San to do it to comfort her, and he's like, whatever, man, it's not up to me who she's into. Again, wrong. I'm sorry, I was wrong, that these kids are not going to grow up and become less idiotic. Some of the things he says in this episode later are amazing to Anjo. So Isak goes to comfort Anjo, and she's like, oh, don't worry about it, you're fine. Also, Jung San's so into you. And then they hold hands, and that's when Anjo's like, oh no, your hand is cold, and then your nose is bleeding. And Isak then denies being bitten, even though she has a flashback where she completely remembers being bitten. And she must have blood on her leg where she was bitten, right?
Not a fan of all the flashbacks.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of all the bite denial. I just feel like this is only making things worse for everybody. Like, let's see some people not deny being infected.
Yeah, but it's okay for her to just say, oh no, and pull up her like pants or whatever to show a bite mark on her calf. Like, I don't need to go back and see it in black and white that some zombie breaks through and sinks her teeth in it. It just feels.
Yeah, but that's the thing, she's not wearing pants, she's wearing a skirt, so it'd be pretty obvious to everybody that she's bitten, I think.
I thought she had sweatpants on under her.
She has sweatpants, maybe I'm forgetting, but regardless, I agree with you, Kyle. I think it's like this was the part that I was like, okay, if you got, and I guess maybe that's what they're showing, is that like no matter what, and this, we see this in the bathroom too with Hari, not Hari, sorry, the
Halim.
where it's like, they're scared, and I guess that's part of the thing. But I also think Isak cares about her friends and probably wouldn't do this. I don't know.
And just generally, one problem that I had with this episode, one thing that we have not mentioned about this episode is it's like so long.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like I think it's probably 90 minutes. Like it's a very long episode. And the parts where they're fighting zombies are very, very fun, but I was kind of like, okay, let's just pick a setting and stay with it, because they're in one classroom and then they fight their way down the hall to get to another classroom, and then they crawl out the window to get to yet another classroom. And it's just kind of like, I feel like there was like some major red pen that could have been taken to condense a bunch of these into the same place, because it really felt like they were just moving between like very, very similar locations and spinning their wheels for a lot of the episodes. So I kind of started,
and the same theme, like, oh, someone gets bitten, they deny they get bitten, all right,
Yeah,
and what are we gonna do with them? Oh, yeah, great, now we gotta like do this next thing. So I agree, I think that could have been condensed quite a bit, because we see it with the coach, we see it with the other girl that gets bitten by the coach, and and then Isak, and so it's sort of like it does feel a little bit long on that end of things.
So I do think, though, that losing Daesu and Isak in rapid succession, because Isak does get shoulder checked out a window again, it's Chang-san acting to save Anjo's life. Like, we should not, ignore the fact that he keeps doing this. But once
I just want to point out that she holds. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on everybody's name.
Anjo holds Isak's hand.
Yes, for so long out that window, and I'm like, a human is really heavy. Like there's no way you would be able to hold this like struggling, kicking,
nope.
Now no longer human zombie thing out of a window for that long. And she doesn't even look like she's trying. She just like got. I was just like, that would be so hard.
Well,
so I thought that
also
was
like
bordering on ridiculous.
And I think completely unlikely that she wouldn't have gotten bitten, because she's trying, like Isak's trying to get her, she's like this entire time. So I don't know, maybe I could get that Isak is so powerful, but we see that they maybe aren't so coordinated. So I don't know that I fully buy that.
Of all of Na Yeon's yelling and cajoling of her classmates, even though she never does anything, although in this scene she throws Chang-san a stool that he can whack Isak off with. I was actually with her in this scene, because she's like, somebody do something, throw her out the window. And I'm like, yes, honestly, Na Yeon, I'm with you here. And that is eventually what happens, but it takes
takes a while to get there,
too long to get there for sure. But the losing those two people in rapid succession for Anjo puts her into this catatonic state, and I thought that was actually kind of well done in this part of the show, when Chang-san, they make the rope ladder or the hose ladder, which was also kind of an interesting and fun scene of getting that through the door and then making the loops, and it showed some teamwork finally between these kids. And then he's about to go down and like test it out, because he's a brave leading man type, sort of, not quite a Daesu, but close. And then he looks over at Anjo and he's like, she's barely there, she's not going to go down unless I need to go last, as what I feel like is going on in his head. His mental arithmetic is like, I can't go first, somebody has to stay here who will put Anjo first,
right?
And so I thought I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, I agree, and I did like the teamwork with the rope. It just took forever with all the weird music and all that stuff. So and then it does take an incredibly long thing to get them all down this, but
and they're reunited with Miss Park, which is nice. We have kind of our groups of survivors are starting to cluster.
Daesu's joyous face when he hugs her.
When he sees her is pretty cute.
Honestly, you looked at Gyeongsu, which is Chang-san's little buddy, going down that pose. I can only imagine how difficult and strenuous that is to do. I think that this high school must have a really good physical education regime. The fact that he's able to do it, and then all those other kids make it down. The only one who seems to have an injury is the glasses kid who has a
Yeah.
cramp, which is hilarious. But I also thought that was kind of interesting that they were just able to, yeah, no problem. Nobody fell off the rope. They've got enough red shirts. They could easily have lost somebody doing that. I thought that might have actually been a good way to lose a kid.
Yeah.
That sounds callous, but a good way to lose a red shirt anyway.
Well, the episode does end on a cliffhanger when the zombies do eventually break in after the very, very long hype speech where he finally convinces her to climb down the rope.
Yeah.
And then the last shot of the episode is all of the zombies kind of rushing in and pushing Chong-san out the window in a way that makes it geometrically very improbable that he would be able to grab onto the rope, although somehow he does.
Yeah, his backward somersault somehow ends up back at the rope.
Yeah.
Speaking of that speech, did any of you think that was just ice cold, where he's like, "Come on, Anjo, let's go." She's like, "It's just that there's nobody that I like anymore in the world."
I know.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. This was what I was thinking of when I was saying, stiff competition, because Anjo is just horrible to him in this scene.
Yeah.
And it's like, your crush Daesu died and now your like life is over. Like that seems a little, I mean, she's struggling with shock.
But then his response to that, Kyle, is, no, people out here, there are people who
like your dad.
you.
Yeah.
Other people like you.
It's not me. Let's just be clear. It is not me, but it's your dad. So live for him. Like, oh my God. That was amazing and horrible. And how repressed is Chong-sen?
Right.
He just can't even admit that he even likes her, even though they've been neighbors and have been like hanging out every day for their entire lives.
Right.
Yeah, and Daesu also we find out that he is alive. He's in the art room, and I think he makes a break for freedom and ends up on the ledge by the end of this episode. Yeah. And during Mrs. Park's announcement earlier, we also get to see a couple of little scenes. There's like 3 kids alive in the library on top of the stacks. They are screwed. Yep. The principal is alive eating like a protein bar under his desk, but there's a bunch of zombies in his office. And we see the dean of students, who's the guy who was giving people demerits, and he's just kind of in a room and looking sad. I think those are all the people we get to see who are still alive.
And we see the effect of the noise, like all the zombies got around the PA system and all that. So that gives a little bit of a hint about it. But I think we should also talk about the hospital scene with our escapee, I suppose, that's sort of going to infect the rest of the town. Because I did enjoy that whole thing tremendously.
Yeah,
she folds in half.
She folds the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's great in the MRI the tube, like, and like anybody in a hospital, they're all like, "Oh, what's wrong?" until she starts like attacking everybody. Though I have to say, if I saw somebody fold in half like that, I don't know, like, and reacting like Exorcist style, like, I don't know, maybe not getting near their mouth would be my tendency. But there was
I do think that like even as a non-zombie, the noise of an MRI is extremely loud and disconcerting and unpleasant. Right. And so I do like that's like the noise that just drives her completely out of her mind. Right. Is just, and causes her to essentially like contort her whole body into impossible shapes, is this horrible tube. And I have to say that I have to watch these with headphones on because my kids go to sleep early and we don't have enough like square footage to get space for me to watch TV out loud after they go down. And so I watch pretty much all my television on the big TV, but with headphones on. And the sound design of this show is impeccable in a way that I find really, really hard to handle. Like, all of the biting noises are so good and like fleshy and crunchy, and the cracking, it's like, it's really well done, but it's so hard to take. Whenever anyone turns, the cracking that happens is like really just impeccably created for maximum discomfort. So the
Many
scene
many
is
bushels of celery were snapped in the making of this show.
yeah, definitely.
uh Kai, I also have to watch this with headphones just because my husband doesn't like these kinds of shows. So I noticed the same thing and I was like, ugh, like for some, especially like all the hospital scenes, it was just pretty disgusting. And even when, especially when they're biting into like a leg or whatever, it's like, somebody had a lot of fun doing
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Really excellent, excellent effect.
I do like all of the brief scenes that we get into, and I can't remember whether these come in episode 2 or episode 3 because I kind of watched them back to back. But um, the the virus is starting to really escape into the outside world, especially post hospital, and like the scene of like all the phones just starting to ring one after the next at the police station, and them kind of realizing like, oh shit, like things are really starting to go down out there, and maybe these people aren't just prank calling us, um is a really good kind of like dawning horror realization on those faces. So
Yeah,
I
and I
like
do.
that scene.
I like that scene. I also like how Anjo is clever enough to know that, well, after their reaction to Sean Sen's call that it's zombies and they're like, yeah, whatever. And she's like, all right, I'm gonna call and I'm gonna try to get home my dad, and she can't do that. And then she's like, okay, there's a big fire at the high school. Everybody come, and they do, and that does sort of like cause the alarm to spread. But it also gives us a chance to be able to see like her dad is in the ambulance and he gets diverted away for another thing. And we do see a little bit of like how it's already spreading throughout the city because like as he and his crew are going into the building, we see the woman kind of like start to like go up against the ambulance, maybe because of the noise it made. I don't know. But I liked those scenes that show just sort of what is happening in the rest of the outside of the school. It kind of keeps it a little bit more interesting.
Well, episode 3 really shows us that the city is going to hell. And in fact, I would say props to the authorities because they go to a level 3 disaster by episode 3, which is still the same day as the original outbreak. It's still the
Right.
afternoon. They have a massive riot police scene in this episode, which I was really looking forward to from the trailer, and it's good. And they evacuate the whole city, or they try to, but honestly, it's probably too late because this thing moves just too fast. But yeah, so they're trying to stay ahead of this, but like by the time on Joe's dad gets told to relocate to outside the city, like he's already in a room with a zombie. Like
Yeah.
he's probably not able to do that relocation thing as easily as they want him to. But
Well, and also she's a like the woman, like there's an assembly woman there, and so we see definitely the whole theme of like class and hierarchy happening here, and just the commentary that it doesn't matter. Like this assembly woman and her staff are like, well, we should be evacuated first, while they're dealing with the aid that's like, and we there are some again just like weird scenes with, they've managed to like duct tape the aid up, and we see just how the knowledge of what is happening is conveyed pretty quickly here. But this is another part where the blood gets all in the mouth of one of the guys that is on his crew, and nothing happens to him, but something happens to the other one that gets a little nicked in the finger by the
yeah,
infected guy. So I do like how it's ramping everything up really, really quickly and seeing how everything's happening. So it's not just limited to the school. But again, we're only in episode 3, right? So if we're already here in episode 3, like what is, I'm like, I have to wonder how it's going to be sustained. And I did not go ahead, so I don't know. But I'm assuming it just gets more and more crazy as this story theme.
Yeah,
uh,
the riot police are cool, but in reality, they're still not quite prepared for
right.
the situation on the ground. They're still trying to mostly just intimidate and control instead of eliminate. So I think the police and military forces have got to get their act together in a big way here.
But we also know that they kind of don't because we see how it just sort of progresses. And we see it a little bit through the story of the student that left who is ill, who we find out is pregnant and hiding the pregnancy.
Mhm.
We see that through her little journey, but also through Cheon-san's mom.
Yeah.
And see how they're experiencing it. And I thought that this was a really interesting and good way to show how the city's going to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah,
Um,
because her neighborhood is like pretty much normal
right.
when
And
she
then
sees
it's
At the
not.
beginning of the episode,
Right.
anyways,
Yeah.
and at the end it's full on badness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her little like what she hears the news like, oh, there's a terrible thing going on, and her first instinct when I first watched this was like, is she just peacing out? And like she wipes out on her moped and then gets back on it
I
again.
know.
And I'm like, no, she's actually just trying to get to school. I thought she was like, oh, we have to evacuate. Bye, Mr. Guy who's hanging the sign on my
I
shop.
know. But really she's, and I think that not that it's she's done this like addition where she's put Cheon-san's face on everything, because that was not there before. So it's also easily identifiable later on in the episode that that's where the student goes with her baby. But I did like that she's just sort of dedicated, not sort of, she's completely dedicated to getting her son, and is stopped by almost nothing except riot police to get to the school. Like I really liked that story, but she does need moped driving lessons, I think. So
Yeah.
It
I
was also
first,
like
yeah, go
poor
ahead.
Chong-san, like I would be mortified.
I know.
It's like if my big like cartoonish like you know face was plastered all over the front of my mom's chicken restaurant. So
And
yeah,
it's not just the restaurant, it's on the moped, it's on like the
Mhm.
apron she's wearing, it's on the bags, like it's everywhere. So but she's dedicated, so there's that. But I think that this episode really goes pretty dark, like on many levels. So there's like two really horribly dark storylines in this episode. um
Main one is with the kids in now the kind of like I guess it's like a recording studio, I guess.
yeah, the
Yeah.
broadcast place,
And
which I guess is where the Mrs. Park did her
we we
really
talked
terrible PA speech.
we talked about the jump scare in the prior episode, and that one didn't really get me, but the one that was so easy to see coming yet did really get me was the fire hose zombie, which the fire hose breaks the window. This is kind of what sets off the action in that classroom.
Mm.
And then Chung-sang goes over to kind of see like why it's waving around so much, and then he's like, oh, it's just the wind, and then blah, this zombie like falls down from tangled up in that hose from up above, and they have a kind of a extended period of whacking it with various things before they finally manage to dispatch it and knock it to the ground. And that jump scare really got me.
It
Yeah,
got me too.
Me too.
It got me too.
We've
Even though I
also
knew it was coming.
I knew
Oh,
it
yeah.
was coming. I knew it was coming, and yet they weighted the extra beat just perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Daesu has also jumped and helped Changsan, who has managed to hold on to the hose from the last episode. And they have like a moment of laughing together because of this weird hug that they're doing. But get into the classroom and everything seems to be fine. It's that scene with the hose where things really start to take a turn for the worse, because then Na Yeon takes advantage of that to start accusing Gyeongsu of being infected. She's also already called him a wealthy in this episode, or in this scene once they're in the recording studio, only making their undercurrent of aggression more pronounced. And most people seem to be taking his side in just about everything, because she has just been yelling at everybody since we were even introduced to her character. She's pretty difficult to be around.
And this is where I think Mrs. Park just totally fails the children, because she consistently covers for I'm sorry.
For Na Yeon?
Na Yeon, like she consistently covers for Na Yeon the entire time. Like every time Na Yeon says something unreasonable or cruel, she's like, you shouldn't say that, but like, let's actually do what you're saying. Like, let's lock this kid in the recording studio. Let's do this other thing. And she's like essentially deferring to the higher status student at literally every turn. I think she's
she is, but also I will say, like, he did have a bloody nose, and he does have a scratch, and we've seen how that's turned out. So I think that while Na Yeon is annoying and horribly bitchy in how, and like says things that have absolutely nothing to do with the fact that he may potentially be infected, it's just her being horrible. I do think that there is a reason maybe to see what's happening with him. But I do, I think Mrs. Park does show later that she is just strangely defensive of Na Yeon. But this is a difficult scene because even though Na Yeon is being incredibly horrible, I just feel like after what we've seen in the other things, and like it was the bloody nose that made me kind of be like, yeah, maybe it's a good idea to put him in a room for a minute, right?
I could see that. Like she's going for compromise, or she's going for everybody to be unanimous. And I agree, Kyle, that it is helping this person who is underhanded and devious and not great. But I don't think she's doing it. I didn't read it, at least, as her doing it out of subservience to her class prestige or whatever. I just saw her
taking the theme too far from
certainly that's a theme in the show. I just don't know that Mrs. Park is gonna subscribe to that stuff as an adult. At least I hope she wouldn't. Maybe.
Yeah, but maybe it's subtle, and it's like, but it is annoying. So I don't know.
Interspersed with all this, we also managed to get a laugh again where Daesu and the glasses kid are like talking about which social media platform to check out and whether they have followers on Instagram or how many followers you have on Facebook. Like these are short, maybe these are not supposed to be funny. Maybe it's supposed to be more like, oh, you're still worried about followers in a zombie apocalypse kind of stuff. But I did kind of appreciate that. Of course, then Gyeong-soo throws the computer out the window, ending that line of intel. You have another heartwarming scene with Jung-san and Gyeong-soo, where they repeat the whistling of Old Lang Syne. Is that how you say that?
Old Lang, yeah, I think so.
So that's their song. Comes back later.
But why is that their song? It's kind of a weird song to have as your theme song, right?
It's a very weird song to have as your theme song. I do remember them whistling it together while they were walking out of the school, but I don't think they ever explained why that song.
No. Also, Gyeong-soo's a way better whistler than Jung-san, who seems a little bit tone deaf. But it's clearly their audio brand. So the fact that he uses it later is very important, I guess.
Right, but then there's he's trying to show solidarity with his friend, which I think his friend, appreciates. But then it becomes the whole theme about, like, okay, well, he's not infected, so now now like he deserves an apology, and there's that whole thing, which is, Na Yeon had said if he was not, she would apologize, and then obviously we see what happens here. And this is the part where I'm like, she's got to be pretty evil, and I have a hard time believing that somebody would do this, but I guess that's where we're going here, to make her the full-on villain.
I kind of loved this, like just how incredibly horrible she truly turns out to be, because of course what she does is she rubs her handkerchief on the zombie bloody piece of broken mop handle, and then intentionally poisons Gyeong-soo with that handkerchief. And yeah, she does put everybody in the room at huge risk, and including herself, just to prove a point. But it's a very dastardly and clever way to basically put her back in the right with everyone in the room, because she gets to say at the end of this, like, look, wasn't I saved you all because you were willing to believe this this guy about his injury. So I kind of thought it was brilliant and devious and tracked with her character as we've seen so far on the show.
Well, too bad Namra was paying attention, because she called her out. And
Namra is so weird.
She's a very strange character.
She puts up that Post-it note in the science lab, and then later when she's reunited with Daesu, kind of slaps him And she's
Yeah,
like, did you see my note?
I
Like,
know.
He's like, no, I was never there.
what are you talking about? And of course I wasn't in the science lab. It's full of zombies.
Yeah.
But and then her, yeah, when she confronts Na Yeon later, it's again, it's like this weird sort of cold affect she seems to have, which, yeah, I guess that's just part of her deal. Is she studies a lot. She's kind of a sociopath, but her heart's in the right place. Maybe. Is
Right.
that?
But we do like I thought they were gonna like play that line out that they wouldn't know that Nayan had done this. So the fact that they called this out almost immediately, I was like, oh well, good, so that this isn't just sort of this weird festering thing. And I did like the choreography where it's like this, it's a very, honestly, it's a pretty similar thing because now like Isak, this is Chansan's good friend. And so
Yeah.
he's got to like get him out the window and he uses his weird whistling thing to do that. And then we see him like run away. And just to confirm how horrible a person she is, Nayeon is like, well, he's not dead. You saw him get up and run away. And it's like, what? So we've got the drama where now both he and Anjo have lost like their best friends basically. So that maybe we'll see a little bit more of them talking about that later or something like that.
Maybe.
But
But
this is where
yeah.
Mrs. Park again, to me, like fails them, because it's just like she sides with them in that she's like, yeah, you killed him and you should be like, you shouldn't be in this group now, we can't trust you. But then kind of doesn't like take it back entirely, but kind of like runs, like they basically essentially evict her out of the group and put her out in the hall, or she kind of does that
Yeah,
herself.
she self
Yeah,
evicts.
self evicts, self isolates, self shuns. But then Mrs. Park puts herself in danger by going after her. So that's kind of, I don't know how I feel about that, but it just doesn't seem to jibe with Mrs. Park protecting them. But she kind of gives a speech about, well, we shouldn't, if we do this, then we're not human anymore if we like let somebody die like this. So
I will
even though
say
she's
that
evil,
I really liked that they did not drag this out. Like
yeah,
I was kind of worried that there was going to be like 3 episodes in the middle here where they were forced to kind of be like deferent to her because she had like quote unquote saved them. And I was like, oh man, this is gonna be really obnoxious because I totally know that she infected that dude.
right.
And so I was really grateful that it all happened like right in the moment right there, that
Yeah, agreed.
we were done with that pretty quickly.
As soon as Mrs. Park leaves and like pulls Na Yeon up a staircase or off out of the way of some zombies, a helicopter spotlight shines through the window, and that's the end of episode 3. Really, there was a little more Cheong-sen trying to comfort Anjo before Gyeongsu died anyway, which she still isn't really wanting to hear. She's like, shut up, I don't want to hear it, you're not helping. But he's
Right.
trying. And I'm hoping that this dynamic doesn't continue too long. They finally have Cheong-san come around and be able to say nice things to her. Like
Mhm.
this in the recording studio, he says like, it's going to be okay, your dad is going to come and save us, or some other people will, and you held on to the last second with Isak, and everything's going to be okay. And he's really, he's not being his doofus self. It feels like Cheong-san at least has grown. Anjo is still a little bit boxed in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's taking the turn, and I agree. I hope they just don't torture us with this ridiculousness. But I have a feeling they're going to, at least on her end of things. And then, in like, and then I think we also, even the reference that he makes that her dad's going to come, and then, obviously we see where her dad is and what's going on there. And he kind of is looking towards where the high school is. I think we can see that I suspect he's going to be I don't know, he's going to have to come to the campus at some point.
Yeah. And so
and
is Cheong-san's mom.
yeah, and
Maybe
and
they'll
both
team
of
up.
them,
That would be they could ride on the moped together.
maybe he can drive the moped better. But
Oh, I think the moped is done
yeah,
during this
she left it
episode.
behind. She left it behind. But and then I think we do need to talk about the horrible scene in the restaurant with the student that
Yeah.
she gave birth in a bathroom, left the baby there, decides after seeing what's happening, goes back as the baby, ends up at some point in the restaurant, having been bitten, and then ties herself with ribbons. I'm not quite sure what she's doing here, but ties herself with ribbons, and the baby's in the corner. So
I gotta say, this really got me. I have this thing that's happening to me where essentially I'm getting, as my kids get older and older, I'm getting more and more uncomfortable with media that directly puts children in serious danger. And it's like tied to the age of my own children, which is like a really like messed up and selfish part of my like lizard brain. So like an 8-year-old in danger, I'm like, whatever, he'll probably get out of it. But like a baby or like a toddler in danger, and I'm like, oh God, I can't take this. I'm so stressed out. So this scene is so tragic and so sad. And her last like act as like a thinking human is to basically protect this baby that I'm sure that she didn't want, or maybe didn't even know about until it was like happening. She puts the baby down in the corner and then goes and ties herself up so that when she turns, she won't be able to reach the baby. And I just it almost broke me. I was so goddamn sad.
Yeah, this baby better freaking get rescued in episode 4, or at least before too much time goes by, because newborns need to eat like every 2 hours.
Yeah.
This is going to be extremely bad if it doesn't go the right way. And I don't want another Train Spotting on my hands where a baby dies in a freaking movie. Not cool.
And I was definitely having flashbacks to like Cargo. That the whole thing with the dad and the baby, and I think this is clearly meant to tug at our heartstrings. And I kind of feel like, I hear you, Kyle, but I am not a parent, and even I was like, oh, somebody better fight. Like, let's not have this. Like, what I was really worried about was that she wouldn't tie herself up in time, and then it was just going to go that way. And I was relieved that that's not what they did.
Yeah.
But I do hope that they show, I don't know, a daring rescue of this kid, because I just like, it's unbearable, and probably deliberately so, right? Like, it's supposed to make you feel that like, oh, the baby's got to be
like, we've seen dozens, if not hundreds, of children die on this show so far, and I'm just like, cone leg, and like,
I know, right?
This is like baby, and I'm just like, no. So
I know. So anyway, so maybe we'll see more in the next episodes, but
I mean, baby is in Chunks and Chicken, so we have like there are story.
That's just such a funny sentence.
There are story reasons for why someone will go there and save the baby. And it could be Changsan's dad who went off to file some forms. Could be Changsan's mom. I don't know. She's probably focused on school. Either way, there's a rescue mission is feasible.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But I will say, as a whole, I'm really enjoying the show. I like it a lot. It's fun. Despite maybe needing a little bit of editing in terms of like some of the repetition in the storylines, I think it's fantastic. So I'm looking forward to watching the next couple episodes and hoping that they are not, having the issue that episode 2 was, but in terms of my ability to stream parts of it. But
real quickly, any predictions for episodes 4 and 5? Are we going to see military escalation? Are we going to see the two nerds on the roof team up with Mullet Bully and Na Yeon to take over the world? What are we thinking?
I feel like Mullet Bully and Na Yeon are gonna have to somehow like join ranks, because they're both the most horrible characters in the show, but they'll probably turn on each other because they're both horrible. I think we're probably gonna see more about Chansan's mom and Anjo's dad, like coming. They have to play like more of a part in coming in. And I think what we're gonna see is maybe the military is just, I mean, we haven't seen it yet, but like the whole city's going down. And so I feel like there's going to have to be something where they're either going to rescue who they can and then ditch.
Like nuke the city.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
maybe.
Or some kind of like walled city situation where they just like barricade everything.
And then the kids are going to be caught behind the barricade or something. That's sort of, but I don't know if that is in the next 2 episodes or further down the line. But I feel like that's coming, right?
Yeah, there's 12 episodes in this show.
I mean, because you got to contain it somehow. But
yeah, we've come a long way to only be by episode 3. Essentially, you have like campus pretty much totally overrun, city, on the verge of being totally overrun, National Assembly people like trapped in the assembly building. So like, they've really ratcheted the stakes up a lot for only being 25% of the way through the show. So some serious stuff has got to happen.
And I feel like something's got to play out with the National Assembly people where they find out what's going to happen with the military or something, right? Like, and which will maybe spur Andra's dad to come and get her or something. Yeah. But we'll have to see.
One thing that they did give us in this episode is lots and lots and lots of shots of the zombies being attracted to sound, per your point, HA.
Oh yeah.
Like, so we saw like there was a scene where all the parents are calling like the school administration, and just phones are ringing like in succession at the unmanned desk at the school office, and the zombies are basically swarming to whichever phone is ringing. Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to see lots of like, luring the zombies down the hall with like some sort of like contraption, like Dune style, or, like just ways of manipulating how the zombies actually work as the kids get kind of slightly more savvy than they have been so far.
So do you think it's going to be the kids, or do you think there's going to be like a military effort to figure that out?
I think both.
Okay. I think the kids are going to be the ones to come up with sound grenades or whatever. Yeah, it'll be. I think that's great. And I think Glass's kid, I want to learn his name. Hopefully he stays around because we still have like 3 red shirts in the recording studio. Ponytail girl has been throwing mad shade at Na Yeon. I really like her for it. Mm-hmm. There's another girl in a pink sweater with short hair. I don't remember her name. And there's like another guy who's kind of like in between Chongsan and Daesu in height. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's some people whose names we actually have not even really been introduced to yet.
So, but I'm looking forward to it. I am enjoying it, and I just kind of like the choices that they're making, even if they're a little off-putting. I think it's fun, and I am like totally into the storyline. I'm having fun with this one, so I'm pretty psyched. But also, again, I don't know where we're gonna go with this many episodes left.
My goodness, it could go anywhere. We could go to Busan. We'll find out.
It could.
Well, so I guess we should sign off. This is a good long one. We'll be back again next time to continue this journey, and I hope that everybody comes along with us. You can give us your thoughts on episodes 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, whatever you like, at Reanimated PCast on Twitter, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. Our show notes are online at reanimatedpodcast.com. For me, COVID Stewart, I bid you adieu.
And I will say ciao and feel better, COVID Stewart.
Seconded. Catch you on the flip side.
Oh, solid.
Ooh, nice, Kyle.
Solid.
Took me an hour and 40 minutes. I got one.